The Cape Winelands are located in the Boerland district of the Western Cape. They boast some of the most amazing wine estates, including in areas such as Paarl, Stellenbosch, and Wellington. One such wine estate is the Spier wine estate that is located in Stellenbosch. The wine estate has various amenities, but what can arguably be said to be its largest draw is its 80-room villa-style hotel. The guests at the hotel can enjoy various activities such as farm walks and wine tours, Segway tours, as well as the use of the pool and the spa. On the 24th of July 2016, the luxury of the Spier Hotel was disrupted when there was the discovery of the semi-nude body of a 46-year-old woman on the bathroom floor of room 221. She was dead, and the question that would have to be answered was who had done this and why. Hi guys, my name is Ntokozo Majola, and this is True Crime After Dark, which, as the name suggests, is a true crime channel. Before we begin, please note that all of the information that is presented to you has been gathered from public sources. All views that are expressed on this channel constitute my own opinion and should not be relied on for any purpose. The aim of this video is to inform and to see what lessons we can learn from the case that is being discussed. Now, lower the blinds, lock the doors, and let's find out what happened after dark. Today we'll be discussing the case of Susan Rohde. Before we get started, I would like to give a trigger warning. This case involves the discussion of the alleged attempt of a person to take their own life, and also includes a detailed discussion of the injuries that the victim in this case sustained at the time of her death. If these are things that you're not comfortable hearing about, I would urge you to click out of this video, and perhaps we'll see each other at another time. Susan met Jason Rohde at a party in 1989 when the pair were 19 years old. The couple began dating and eventually got married in 1993. Susan studied to be and worked for a time as a teacher. The couple then moved to Australia for a brief period of time. Then Jason expressed that he missed South Africa and he wished to move back. While Susan did not share these sentiments, she decided to go along with her husband, and the couple moved back to South Africa. They chose Johannesburg, Bryanston as their base of operations. Susan and Jason had 3 children together. The first was a daughter that was born through IVF, and the second and third were a pair of twins that were then born after the first. Susan was a mother that cared about her children. She took particular interest in their upbringing and in the manner in which they were disciplined. Susan was a person who also gave of her time. She was a person that decided to give her time to charitable organizations, and one of the things that she used to do was that she used to volunteer her time to help people from disadvantaged backgrounds to get assistance in mathematics as well as with reading. One of the organizations that she volunteered for was called Hearts of Hope, and the lead organizer there was a woman by the name of Deborah. And Deborah had this to say about Susan. She said that Susan was a woman who was particularly creative, and that was a woman that loved to decorate. Susan was also a woman that enjoyed going to the gym, and all of these activities were things that garnered her a wide circle of friends. While Susan's siblings were located in various areas, her brother was located in Australia and her sister was located in Cape Town, my sense that I got from the research was that this was nevertheless a close family. Not much is known about Jason Rohde until this case thrust him into the public spotlight. What is known is this. Jason Rohde was raised in the United Kingdom and he lived there until the age of 3. He thereafter moved to South Africa, and as I've already mentioned, he and his wife then briefly went to live in Australia. This granted him dual Australian and South African citizenship. At some time after the couple returned to South Africa, Jason became an employee of Lou Gifflin Sotheby's International Realty. Lou Gifflin Sotheby's International Realty is an international real estate company. The company's website indicates that it is involved in real estate rentals, sales, as well as auctions. The company has its roots as a 1700s London-based auction house. This, together with the esteemed reputation that the real estate agents that work for the company have, make it a domineering force in the property sector. In South Africa, the company has locations in prime areas such as Ballito, Sea Point, and Sandton. In 2016, Jason was the national CEO of the company, and with this came a lot of responsibility, travel, and of course, financial success. One of the markers of his financial success was that the couple and their family lived in a 10 million rand, or approximately $500,000 home. And this was a home that Susan had lovingly decorated. In 2016, when Jason was traveling, he went to one of the offices which the company had, which, as I've previously mentioned, was an office in Sea Point. There he met a woman by the name of Jolene Altersgeier. Jolene Altersgeier was a woman that became a real estate agent in 2002. In 2016, she was employed by Lou Gifflin Sotheby's International Realty as a real estate agent, and she specialized in residential sales and rentals. When she was not doing her job, she preferred to be outdoors. After their meeting in 2016, Jason and Jolene began having an affair. Initially, they were able to keep their affair secret, but this did not last for long. 2 weeks after Valentine's Day, Susan discovered that Jason was having an affair. This was because she found a card that Jolene had slipped into his laptop bag. Jason, who was unaware that the card was in his laptop bag, had not had time to get rid of the card. And so when Susan found it, she realized that it was from a woman, and she concluded that her husband was having an affair. Her response was to lock herself and Jason in the ensuite bathroom of their bedroom and compel him to phone Jolene and end the affair. Jason put his phone on loudspeaker, as he was instructed to do, and he ended the affair with Jolene while Susan was listening. According to Jason, after Susan discovered the affair and he had ended it, she became consumed by thoughts of the affair. Susan held on to Jason's phone after he had ended the affair with Jolene, and she even intercepted text messages from Jolene, still trying to get into contact with Jason, even though he had ended the affair with her. Which, just end it, girl. You're getting involved with a married man. He's now said that he wants to end the relationship, whether it's of his own volition or not. I think it would probably have been, if, earlier wasn't a graceful time to exit, surely now at the point where his wife finds out, that is a graceful point to then exit. Nevertheless, after Susan had intercepted these messages, she decided that she was going to confront Jolene. And so she booked a flight to Cape Town and indicated that she was going to head to the company's offices in Sea Point. She also asked Jason to tell her all of the locations that he had taken Jolene during the course of his affair with her. Now, this is an interesting point and a time where I would like to step away briefly from the timeline and just discuss my personal view of the situation. I'm not a psychologist, but to me, this just speaks of two things. It speaks of a person who, firstly, is in a way obsessed with knowing everything that has happened during the course of this betrayal that has occurred to them. And it also, I think, on a more practical level, speaks to a woman wanting to know all of the places that her husband has taken his mistress, so that she can in future avoid those locations. Even though Susan said that she was going to confront Jolene, this did not end up happening. After she visited all of the landmarks of her husband's affair with Jolene, she left Cape Town and returned to Joburg. I think to me, this speaks of a woman wanting to, protect herself. There's a sense of self-preservation there, in the sense that she does not necessarily want to, humiliate herself in front of people by making herself the subject of office gossip, but also she's thinking of the position that her husband is in. This is his workplace, and she does not want to make him the subject of rumors about him being involved with another woman. The incident in the ensuite bathroom would mark the beginning of a turbulent time in the couple's 23-year marriage. When the couple decided to begin attending marriage counseling, it had mixed results. When Jason announced that he planned to attend the Lou Geflin Sotheby's International Realty Conference, which he was to co-host, and which was to take place at Spier Hotel that year, Susan announced that she would be accompanying him. Jason became so angry about this that he actually stormed out of the therapy session that the couple was in at the time. Nevertheless, Susan remained firm in her determination to attend the conference with her husband, even going so far as to book a Botox session and to tell the person that was working on her to make her pretty. Here, I think we see something that is common when partners have extramarital affairs. It's this idea that I, through my own efforts, as the partner that was stepped out on, can somehow bring this person back to me, can make them, through my own efforts, feel as if I'm worthy of their attention once more. And this is seen by, Susan going out and going through all of these efforts on behalf of her marriage. So going and, having marital counseling, going and, having Botox, insisting on accompanying her partner to a conference, or in a time and when there's signs that this partner is not necessarily interested in and may even be irked by the efforts that she's making. But to Susan's, or in Susan's mind, or perhaps, from her perspective, she had a lot to fight for. The couple had, as I said, a 23-year marriage that they had. They had children. They had this life that they had built together, and also this financial, life that they had built together. And the idea that there was this person that came and all of a sudden was, a person that would come in and seek to interrupt that was something that I think she probably saw that she could fight through and sort of through her own efforts get out of or through. The Lou Geflin Sotheby's International Realty Conference took place over the weekend of the 22nd to the 24th of July 2016. Although Jason avoided direct contact with Jolene for most of the conference, he nevertheless sent some text messages to her. Messages that were exchanged between them on the morning of Saturday, the 23rd of July 2016, read as follows. Jolene to Jason. Nice ring. Renew your vows this weekend? Jason replied, you made me put it on for your benefit. In my opinion, in this text message exchange, Jolene is pouting about the fact that Jason is wearing his wedding ring. But Jason then points out to her that, well, first of all, she made him do it and that it is for her benefit. The benefit that is being alluded to, in my view, is the idea that it will allay Susan's concerns that the affair between the pair is still going on. Now, this text message exchange is quite interesting because it serves as evidence that Jason was wearing the ring in question on the weekend of this conference. And it's quite ironic that through her, what I call and what I view as pouting, Jolene actually provided evidence of this. As national CEO of Lou Geflin Sotheby's International Realty, it was Jason's role to co-host the conference. And one of his duties was to give the opening address, which he did. During this opening address, he was very careful to avoid any eye contact or any sort of, motion or sort of indication that he was paying any attention to Jolene, and instead he focused his attention solely on his wife. And at this time, I imagine that his wife, that is Susan, may have been feeling vindicated, that all of her efforts to, try and put her marriage back together and to get over the hurdle that was the infidelity with Jolene were paying off. However, the signs that the relationship between Jolene and Jason were not quite over would rear their head once again on the evening of the 23rd of July 2016, when Jason couldn't help himself. He sent various messages to Jolene, which read as follows. "'Cause I'm frustrated. I can't be with you, who I want. You still love me? All I can think of is you. I want to scream with frustration. I don't want anything more in my life than to be with you. I absolutely hate it. I just want it to end. Having you close is driving me crazy. Sue is driving me nuts. She follows me around like an effing shadow." On the evening of the 23rd of July 2016, there was to be a gala dinner that formed part of the conference. But before the gala dinner took place, there was a period for the attendees of the conference to rest. And so at this time, Jason and Susan head back to their room. And it's my understanding that at this time, Susan hoped to spend some private time with her husband, but he had other plans, namely to talk to his mistress. Jason decides that he's going to sneak into the bathroom and text his mistress. And it's at this point that he once again gets caught by his wife. So what happens at this point is that an argument breaks out between the two, because it becomes clear that the relationship between Jolene and Jason is not over. The argument escalates to the point that it becomes physical, and part of it is that Susan tries to block Jason from leaving the bathroom. Jason realizes that if he leaves and goes to be with his mistress, this may result in a confrontation between his wife and his mistress. And he clearly cannot have that happen because this is a work event. So he settles for pushing his wife out of the way so that he can get out of the bathroom. What's significant about this is the way that he pushes his wife out of the way. So he decides that he is going to stick a pen in her neck area and jab it at her, and this then allows him to get out of the bathroom. This is of significance because of two things. Firstly, it shows that there is a propensity or a willingness, firstly, for the couple to engage in physical arguments, and secondly, there is also a willingness for Jason to, when they're fighting, go for Susan's neck area. I have to say that when I was doing the research, it became clear to me that this is a critical point for Susan and Jason alike. For Susan, it's becoming clear that all of the efforts that she's made, as I've previously mentioned, marital counseling, the efforts to do Botox, the efforts to attend this conference with her husband and put up this united front, are not yielding success. And this may lead to, as it would, I think, in anyone that is involved in a similar situation, some anxiety, because you want to know what it is that you could possibly do next to try and save your marriage, especially given the length of time that, the marriage has been going on. So for Jason, it becomes clear that he's also reached a critical point, because now his wife understands and knows that the relationship between him and his mistress is still going, and they're at a work function. And so it's very dire in the sense that he does not want his wife to go out and confront his mistress because he has a reputation to uphold and he doesn't want his personal life impacting his business life. The couple nevertheless decide to attend the gala dinner and nothing of note happens at this time. On the early morning hours of the 24th of July 2016, Jolene was in a ground floor room with two of her colleagues. One was a man and the other was a woman. So they were enjoying some drinks and conversation. And it's at this point that Jason walks in. He doesn't say anything to anyone. He simply decides that he's going to sit at the end of the bed and fold his arms, and he simply surveys the scene. I don't know about you, but if the CEO of my organization decided to do that, I would be really uncomfortable. But nevertheless, this is what happens. He is shortly followed by his wife, who, stands outside the door, and she calls for him to come outside. When, he doesn't listen, Susan then decides to come into the room and she taps him on the arm as if to say, "Come on, let's go." And Jason then decides to leave the room. And the couple stand outside the room arguing for about 10 to 20 minutes. This is an argument that can be heard by the people that are in the room. So what thereafter happens is that the argument between the couple ends, Susan leaves, and Jason comes back into the room. He then is a man that is much more animated and jovial than, before, and the, interaction between him and everyone in the room continues. On the morning of the 24th of July 2016, there are heated text messages that are exchanged between Susan and Jolene. And I think these were spurred on by the fact that, Susan has just found out that her husband is still pursuing this woman. And even when she's tried to get her husband to leave where he is with this woman, he won't leave. And so she is probably fuming. And this is something that can be seen from the text messages. Unfortunately, some of the text messages were deleted, and so we don't have all of the messages, but I will read what we do have. Please note that there's some very foul language that's used, so just prepare yourselves. So, Jolene sends a message to Susan, "Go wash your mouth." Susan sends a message to Jolene, "Whore, wash your own effing mouth." Susan sends a message to Jolene, "After you suck my husband's dick." Susan to Jolene, "Jason said you were only good for one thing, and that's why he keeps coming back. He said you would be the last person he ever wanted to be with." Thereafter, there are text messages from Jason to a man by the name of Brendan Mueller. He sends a message that reads, "Drama, but okay." Then an outgoing call is made from Jason to Susan's phone at 8:02 a.m. on the morning of the 24th of July 2016. Now that we've looked at the text exchange between Susan and Jolene, I would like to delve into the rather sticky subject of Jolene's culpability in this relationship that she had with Jason. Now, Jolene was a person that worked with Jason in the sense that she worked in the same company. He was the CEO of the company. She would have known at some point that he was married, he had a family, and the getting involved with him was to get involved with a married man, a man that had children and a family. So to my mind, that places moral culpability on her for those actions. Now, I would like to emphasize that Jason was the married person and that he was the one that stepped out on his vows. And so that to me is a person that has greater moral culpability in this context. However, that does not fully absolve Jolene of her actions in this regard. On the morning of the 24th of July 2016, Jason called the maintenance man that was on duty at Spier Hotel to tell him that the bathroom door in his room would not open. Now, at this point, I would like to detail a bit more about the bathroom doors at the hotel. The bathroom doors at the hotel locked from the inside, and each bathroom door had a hook at the top. This would be used for hanging robes or other items of clothing for guests to be able to have access to once they were finished with their bath or their shower. So where the door was locked from the inside, the only way that it could be accessed on the outside was if a person made use of one of three things. That would be a screwdriver, a teaspoon, or a coin. So when the maintenance man arrived on the scene, what he did was that he tried to open the door using the ordinary mechanism that a person would use to open a door, which is turning the knob. And when this didn't work, he then made use of one of those three methods I mentioned that were available to him to open the door, and that is a screwdriver. So once he basically opened the door using the screwdriver, what became visible was a pair of someone's legs on the bathroom floor. And this caused Jason to run past the maintenance man, shouting, "Susie." He then cradled Susan's head in his arms, and when the maintenance man went in to the bathroom, what he could see was that it appeared that Susan was not breathing. He also saw that there was a cord that was wrapped around her neck. Now, with this cord, it was a cord that was later revealed to be a straightener cord. And what the maintenance man said he saw was that there were a few knots that were tied in the straightener cord. Jason asked the maintenance man to help him get the cord off of Susan's neck, which he did. The maintenance man says that he recalled that the cord was not tied particularly tightly around Susan's neck. So the maintenance man then leaves the room and he calls into his control center, asking them to call police and ambulance as well as security. Once again, I am going to give the trigger warning because it's at this point that we are going to discuss the state of Susan's body. When the police arrived on the scene, what they found was that there was blood on the hotel floor. There's also blood on the bed sheets, the duvet, the pillow, as well as on the gown that Susan was found to be partially wearing. So when I say that Susan was found to be partially wearing the gown, the state in which she was found was that she was found lying on the bathroom floor with her head pointing towards the toilet and the bath basin. She was also in a position that her legs were curled under the sink. So the gown that she was wearing was covering part of her body, but her arms were not actually in the gown. A thorough investigation was done of the scene, and what was found was that there was a laptop bag that was searched, and in that laptop bag there was a letter which revealed that Jason was having an affair, and it was also found that there was a watch with a broken watch strap. So Jason was surveyed from head to toe, and it was found that he had a superficial injury on his finger as well as an injury to his back. The PAL Forensic Pathology Services were called, and a doctor by the name of Dr. Kutsia Khan was brought to the scene, and he was the one that inspected Susan's body initially. This is what he noted. He noted that there was a ligature mark around her neck that sloped slightly to the right in an upwards direction. A ligature is any instrument that is used to tie or bind tightly. There were also bruises and scratches that were observed, and the scratches that were observed were to the bottom of her jaw as well as to the lower left side of her neck. There were no knot marks that were observed, as the doctor would have expected to have seen had the straightener cord that had been wrapped around Susan's neck been what she had used to end her own life. Susan had a hematoma, that is a bruise on her left eye, and she also had a injury on the left occipital bone of her eye. So this was something which the doctor was of the view was consistent with blunt force trauma that was applied by somebody who was wearing a ring, as opposed to an effort by a person to take their own life. Susan also had various bruises that were in the stages of healing. She also had abrasion marks to the bottom of her feet as well as to her shoulder, and the doctor was of the view that these were consistent with being dragged on the floor of the hotel room into the bathroom. Based on rigor mortis, which is the stiffening of the body that occurs after death due to chemical reactions, as well as lividity, which is the pooling of blood in certain areas of the body once it settles, and temperature, it was concluded that Susan's time of death was 5:40 a.m. on 24 July 2016. However, at trial, this time was amended to a window of between 2:58 a.m. to 8:28 a.m. on the 24th of July 2016. When an autopsy was conducted 2 days later, it was conducted by Dr. Kutsia Khan as well as Dr. Abrams. And at this stage, more information about the injuries that Susan sustained emerged. Some of the injuries that she had were, firstly, she had broken ribs, and at this time it was not clear whether she had sustained these injuries as a result of CPR or whether she had sustained them as a result of what had gone on prior to her death. When an assessment of the ligature mark was made, it was found that the position of the ligature mark, or the mark that it made on the skin, did not line up to the internal damage that was sustained by Susan when an assessment of her internal tissues was conducted. What this led doctors to believe was that this was consistent with a staging of her death rather than her having died as a result of her trying to hang herself by tying the straightener cord to the hook that was on the hotel room door, as had been alleged by Jason. This was further supported by the lividity that was observed, and this was as the blood that had pooled after Susan's death had pooled in her shoulder area as well as in her buttock area, and the injuries that were caused by the straightener cord were seen to have been consistent with being caused to a person that was lying on their back, as opposed to a person who was kneeling and in the act of trying to take their life. The further injuries that were observed, and these included internal hemorrhages as well as a fracture of the thyroid cartilage, which were not consistent with a person having hanged themselves using the straightener cord as had been alleged. Rather, it was found that the cause of death was likely to be manual strangulation and asphyxia. Regarding the area where the crime had occurred, it was determined that it was likely to have occurred in the bedroom area of the hotel, where Susan was strangled manually, that is through the use of someone's hands, and that she was thereafter smothered using one of the pillows that was on the hotel bed. A second post-mortem was conducted, and this was done at the insistence of Jason's defense team. So this was conducted by a doctor by the name of Dr. Perumal. So the doctor concluded that the cause of death of Susan was her taking her own life. Now, this was based on the history between Jason and Susan, which the doctor had said was turbulent and had led to Susan feeling so disheartened that she decided to take her own life. What the analysis by Dr. Perumal failed to take into account was that the history between Jason and Susan was alleged, and that the person that he got this account of the history from, that is Jason, had a vested interest in making this be the version that was presented as being, you know, the history between the two, i.e. a turbulent history that would lead, you know, to Susan feeling that she had no other option other than to take her own life. Another shortfall of the assessment or the autopsy that was conducted by Dr. Perumal is that it failed to account for a number of the abrasions and other injuries that were found on Susan by Dr. Katia Khan and Dr. Abrams in their autopsy. On the 27th of July 2016, Mark Holmes, that is Susan's brother, who was in Australia at the time, received a phone call from Jason. And during this phone call, Jason made a stunning announcement. He said to Susan's brother, "I killed her, I killed her, I killed her." At the time, Mark thought that this was due to the state of grief that Susan's husband found himself in, and not that he was speaking literally. And so he tried as best as he could to comfort Jason. But you know, as time went on, this view would change. On the 30th of July 2016, Jason held a meeting in his home. That meeting was attended by Jason himself. It was also attended by some of Susan's family members, including Mark, as well as Susan's parents. At this meeting, Jason announced that he had been having an affair. He also announced that he was a suspect in his wife's murder and that he was currently under investigation for her murder. The police received word that Jason was planning to leave the country, and on the 24th of August 2016, they arrested him. Jason was charged with 2 crimes. The first crime that he was charged with was the murder of Susan, for which he stood to have basically a minimum sentence of 15 years imposed on him. He was also charged with defeating or obstructing the administration of justice, in that he had basically altered the crime scene, and he had been dishonest or misled the police after the crime had occurred. Jason pleaded not guilty to both counts, and he said that what happened was that his wife was in such severe anxiety and depression that she had felt that there was no other option than to take her own life. During the trial, more emerged of the sequence of events that had actually happened during the time around and after Susan's death. So the first witness that was called was a man by the name of Mark Thompson, not to be confused with Susan's brother Mark Holmes. Mark Thompson was a colleague of Jason's. He had been a colleague of Jason's for a period of about 7 years. And what happened was that he said that on the morning of the 24th of July 2016, he had been awake and he had heard that there's something that had happened in one of the hotel rooms. And so this had basically led to him trying to figure out what was happening, and that was when he had stumbled across the scene where Jason was with his wife in the hotel room. So this would be, you know, after the maintenance man had opened the bathroom door and Jason had gained access to where Susan was. And so what happened was that when Jason saw Mark, what he said was, "Mark, help me." And so what Mark did was he then entered the room and he began to perform CPR on Susan. What's important to note is that Mark had never performed CPR on a human being before. To clarify, Mark was trained in performing CPR. However, he had never, as I said, performed it on a human being before, and this showed. The reason why I say this showed is that during the time that he was performing CPR, he actually failed to block Susan's nose, and this obviously, you know, had an impact in his rescuing efforts. During the time that Mark was trying to render aid to Susan, which was a period of approximately 30 to 45 minutes that he was trying to basically perform CPR, he found himself asking numerous questions to himself as he observed Jason's behavior. The first question that Mark asked himself was, why was Susan naked? The second thing he asked himself was, why was the cord so flimsy and why was it not tied tautly to the hook if she had used it to hang herself? And lastly, he asked himself, why would Jason not speak to his wife? All that would occur was that Jason kept repeating, "Mark, help me," and he only blew into his wife's mouth once. Now, this to me is just something that stands out as something so horrifying and so painful. I know that we all react very differently in traumatic situations, and you can't know how you are going to react. And so I can't necessarily say what I would do in that situation. But to me, it is particularly telling that your colleague renders 30 to 45 minutes of assistance while you can only make one attempt. During Mark's resuscitation efforts, he noted that Susan's entire neck area was more bruised than he would have expected if the flimsy straightener cord was the murder weapon or the weapon that she had used to take her own life. Her whole neck was particularly bruised, and this was something that he observed. Another thing that he observed was that her head was lying furthest away from the door, and he couldn't reconcile that with a person who had allegedly hanged themselves from a hook that was on the door. Mark was obviously traumatized by the events that transpired, and he tried to reach out to Jason. And when he did this, he was rebuffed. So at trial, when Jason's attorneys tried to suggest that this was due to the negative press that Jason was receiving at the time, and the idea that Jason was being ostracized by people, Mark, pointed out that at the time that he was making efforts to reach out to Jason, it was prior to there being any reports about him being a suspect in his wife's murder. In my view, I would also like to add that if a person is reaching out to you, they can hardly be said to be part of the people that are ostracizing you. When Susan's father arrived at the scene, he actually asked Jason to show him his hands. He wanted to inspect Jason's hands. And this is something that he did. And he observed once again the superficial cut that was on Jason's hands. Another thing that Susan's father did is that he went and he inspected the bathroom door of the room that Jason had been moved to, since the room that he had been sleeping in was now a crime scene. So what happened was that he basically looked at both sides of the door and he inspected the locking mechanism. So to me, this is also a very telling thing that, it doesn't necessarily speak overtly of suspicion, but it does speak to, there's a story I'm being told here, and I want to confirm it for myself. And I think that that is something in the circumstances that would be valid. When Jason attended Susan's funeral, he was late and he didn't stay particularly long. He said that he felt ostracized by Susan's family, who were treating him with a mixture of suspicion as well as sympathy. Now, from their perspective, I completely understand this because they are being told that their loved one has taken their own life and they are trying to reconcile that with the person that they knew. And another thing is that they also don't necessarily want to think ill of the person that was their loved one's spouse. So they're in a tough position and they're trying to navigate that with as much grace as they can. Susan's psychologist was the person best placed to talk about her mental state at the time that her death occurred. And she was a woman by the name of Janet Newcomb. Janet Newcomb testified that Susan was preoccupied by thoughts of the affair, that she was anxious, and that she did feel particularly upset. And what added to the upset was that she discovered her own father's infidelity. And I think that this led to some comparisons between her own father and Jason. But in that case, she saw that her parents had stayed together and that had worked out for them. Susan admitted to feeling particularly anxious when Jason was away, and she wanted to know, about his whereabouts and what he was doing. Jason, on the other hand, he would grow irritated when she, did this, and he felt that she would hop on about, the affair, and he wanted her to just get over it and to move on, but this was not necessarily something that she could easily do. When Susan was at the conference, she actually made contact with her psychologist, and she said that she had received a lot of compliments, but she wished that they had been from Jason. She did say, however, that, if things escalated at the conference, she did have a plan to basically leave the conference and go and be with her sister who lived in Cape Town, and that is Angela. So now my thinking around this is that it actually casts doubt around, the story that Jason was telling, which is that Susan was a person that was in a dark frame of mind, who was, depressed. And this is something that is echoed by her psychologist, who said that while Susan was, anxious, she was not depressed or in, this dark state of mind, And in fact, when Susan had been particularly or specifically asked whether she would, take her own life, she had said no, she would never do that to her kids. So, there was really not much of a leg to stand on when it was coming to Jason's case. On top of that, Susan had a lot to live for in addition to her kids. She had her charitable works. She also had her friends that she made from her various endeavors, including these charitable works, as well as, her fitness pursuits, and all these other social endeavors that she was engaged in. In fact, Susan did not even believe that this affair would result in a divorce. So she merely viewed it as a hurdle to get through. And so once again, there's just clear doubt that is cast on the story that she was in such a dark frame of mind that she would decide to take her own life. The bloodstains that were found at the scene were analyzed for DNA, and they were found to belong to both Jason and Susan. The scrapings that were taken from under Susan's fingernails were also analyzed for DNA, and the DNA was found to belong to Jason. This, in my view, tells a harrowing tale of a woman that was desperately fighting to survive, and it is the opposite of the story that Jason tries to tell, of a woman so depressed and so devastated that she would take her own life. As can be expected, Jason's timeline of events differs. Now, he agrees principally with the timeline of events that was presented, but there are some critical differences. So this is his version. He says that when Susan and him were walking back from their room after the gala dinner, what happened was that she injured her toe when she basically got her foot stuck between a flower bed and a ledge, and that she complained about it so furiously that she was shouting about it in the room. Now, he then says that, after this happened, they argued a bit, and then he just said to her, "I can't do this anymore." After he made that statement, he says that he believes that this is the catalyst that led her to realize that her marriage was over and to basically make the decision to take her own life. Now, after making such a monumental statement, mind you, he then says he fell asleep. Okay. So he then says he woke up to the text message from Brendan Mueller, which we've previously discussed, asking whether he was okay, to which he replied, "Drama, but okay." And then basically his wife woke him up once again to tell him that he had text messages from Jolene shouting at him, and this was at around 7 a.m. in the morning, and that at that time, she was wearing a bathrobe and she was headed towards the bathroom. This was the last he saw of her, and he then basically decided to go back to sleep. During Jason's testimony, he said that the straightener cord had been tied particularly tightly around Susan's neck and not loosely, as the maintenance man, Mark Thompson, and even the state pathologists had all testified. He also said that when he spoke to Susan's brother, Mark Holmes, that he had said that he killed her metaphorically, and he had not meant the statement literally. When the court looked at all of the evidence that was provided by Jason, they had the following to say. The accused's testimony as to the events of the fateful morning is interspersed with inherent improbabilities, and seen within the factual matrix of the matter, falls to be rejected as not being reasonably possibly true. His version of events on the morning of his wife's death came across as scripted. He showed difficulty in answering questions beyond the facts to which he testified in chief, could not answer questions crucial to the events of that moment, and contradicted himself in a number of ways. As the hotel room was located on the ground floor, another thing which the court pointed out is, if Jason was so worried about his wife, why didn't he just go around to the side and access the bathroom through the window, because it was a ground floor window that was easily accessible to a grown man? So they also indicated that if you're so worried about your wife, it's not clear why the call that you make is to maintenance of the hotel and not emergency services. And the reason they said this is that once maintenance comes and opens the bathroom door, what other help can they provide? Whereas if you, for example, call emergency services like an ambulance, they can be of more assistance. Ultimately, having considered the evidence, the court concluded as follows. At about 7:06 in the morning, Susan would have woken up Jason, and she would have been really angry at the fact that the affair between Jason and Jolene was going on still, and she would have made a statement to the effect of, "Look what your whore has sent me," referring to the text messages that we went through earlier. And at this point, Jason would have perhaps then made the statement to the effect that he wanted to end the marriage. The wrestling match that, you know, the pair had been engaged in earlier, which I referred to when I spoke of the fact that the pair had argued in the bathroom, may have reignited. And it was during this wrestling match that Jason would have, you know, pinned Susan down and strangled her. He then would have used the pillow that was on his side of the bed to then smother her, leading to her death by strangulation and asphyxiation. And this basically is the conclusion that the court reached about how Susan Rohde tragically lost her life. The court concluded that it was not Susan taking her own life that was the result of her death, but rather it had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Jason Rohde was the one who had murdered her. So the court initially sentenced Jason to 15 years for the murder, and then a sentence of 5 years for defeating the administration of justice. This amounted to an effectual 20-year sentence for the crime. Unfortunately, this was not the end of the story. In 2021, he appealed his sentence and it was amended to 15 years for the murder and 3 years for defeating the administration of justice, with the sentence for defeating the administration of justice to run concurrently with his murder sentence. This meant that he would only serve 15 years. Recently, Susan's loved ones have remembered her as follows. Angela said, "My heart aches, but it aches especially for my nieces. They have lost so much more than anyone could imagine." Mark Holmes had similar sentiments. "We remain a family united. We are getting stronger, and we will go forward doing what we can to make my nieces and our lives full of love, full of meaning and purpose. We will not allow our lives to be defined by the actions of another." This is what Susan would have wanted for her daughters and expected of us. Diane and Neville say, "We hold Sue close to our hearts and will always celebrate the life of our darling daughter with love, with respect, and with pride." Thank you so much for watching. If you took something from today's case coverage, please give this video a like, share, comment below, and I hope you stay safe. And I'll see you next time, After Dark.